friends here and my family's here, and we came in because of our season of life. We had to come in really short just for the event. And so I didn't get to spend a lot of any one-on-one time with really anybody, which is unfortunate. I rarely would do that. We would always schedule something to be able to spend more time, but we just moved into our house, and my wife leaves for her only ministry trip this year when I get back. So I literally come back and she leaves and I do daddy duty. But I want to just introduce and say hi to my mother-in-law, Lisa, right back here. Lisa, wave. And then my Aunt Gina, her sister, right back there. And I just love you guys. Thanks so much for coming tonight. And is Jimmy there too? Oh, you are. I'm sorry. Then my Uncle Jimmy right there. So sorry, Jimmy. I didn't know you were there. But I just love that our family's here. Well, we have a little adventure to go on tonight, and I'm excited about this because just coming to Sojourn Church, these guys are so amazing. And so you have an impeccable reputation amongst all of our friends. Just you're so loved, and you've built for so long with so much integrity and credibility. And I just believe, I love the redesign. Like I saw you guys redesigned. It was already nice before, but I love your redesign. And I feel like God's redesigning a lot for this church and that he has plans for you. And I just felt like I was impressed with, there's a plan on how to not just come into the future, but to multiply everything that's already happened in such an exponential way. And I feel there's a blessing. 2018 is like a pivot year for what's coming. And I feel like there's new strategies. I feel like you guys might have run out of a lot of the old because you're running into a new. Like there might be a gap between the old and the new, but it's God's creating space so that you can dream and think and plan. And so I just wanted to give you guys just a little encouragement as a church, because I feel like something is on the horizon. And even 2019 and 20 and coming into 2021 as a church, there's going to be such an outpouring of leadership development and of people going out. I saw like a going out from here. And so he's really preparing you for an even greater work than what you've already been doing. And so I'm so encouraged to be here and to be able to tell you some good news. And for the leaders here, I just love you guys. And the worship team's always great here. This is like you guys are blessed. Like, I don't know if you know this. It takes most places a while to get there, and it's usually after 3 or 4 conference sessions, not church meetings, and they start there. Roland, I don't know if it's just that you carry the place all the time, so you just we just enter in with you when you get up on the platform with your team. Like all of a sudden we get the benefit of the fact that that's just where you live. Seriously, I'm in the back room. I didn't stay in the worship tent the whole time here, but we're literally watching. We're trying to have a conversation. I was like, this isn't working. So we just came out. We're like, forget it. This is too good. We can't miss this, Most people pay a lot of money to get conference worship leaders to come for a special moment. And you guys have this in your lifestyle. I mean, this is crazy. And I mean that for the whole team, not just, I know you're helping to lead this, but it's the whole team. The bass player, she rocks. She rocks my life. Where are you? Where's the bass player? What's her name? Barbara, you all know Barbara because Barbara is a gifted woman. That woman is she's scary gifted. I was like, I want to see her cut loose because she was so natural, just I could do this with my eyes closed where I'm asleep all day. I wanted to hear what she could do outside of that. I'm like, whoa, jazz.com. Okay. I'll just keep encouraging people if I don't stop, and it's not prophetic necessarily, so I'll move on. We just came out with a new devotional, and I wanted to call it the 90-Day Challenge, but my team and my publisher was like, let's make a devotional softer. It's not a challenge, but it's more you can hear from God too. Just take these 90 days of lessons. And they're like, no, I want people to be challenged and go for it. But we decided to make it a devotional. Much softer for you. But I want to encourage you, I want 90 days of your time, and I want you to go on a journey, if you already hear from God or if you don't hear from God regularly, in your own life, to be impacted, to be challenged, yes, challenged, to hear him every day and to do this as a lifestyle. And if you're not in that lifestyle, or if maybe you're in a dry season, you need the book. And so I want to encourage you to get the book. Yeah, we have it on digital form as well, but you could hold this one, which is nice for a lot of people when you do devotional. I like to hold devotionals. I have digital stuff too, but it's hard to do. I don't know, maybe you're a digital person. But I want to give this to somebody who's working on a music project that you may have laid down for a while, but you're reinitiated in this season. Who is that? This is a prophetic word. Woman back there? I'm going to give it to you. You're the first hand I saw. So right back there, Ryan, do you want to run it back to her? So this is for you, and this is going to help you in your music project, which is really good. The last thing is, you just saw we had the Keys of His Economy e-course, but we also have God's Secrets e-course, and you don't have to have the physical copy for this to get this. You can just go online and get these. And what I love about the God Secrets e-course, this is an e-course on words of knowledge, and this is for everybody. It's not for like a specialty course for certain people who are gifted. This is for all of us, and I'm going to give you the incentives through this of the theology of why you need words of knowledge in your life, because it's a game changer. It's a game-changing gift, and it appears over 69 times in the Bible, in both the Old and the New Testament, and I take you on a journey to where you can have this gift usefully in your life, and it will engage you in culture around you. So this is a hard physical copy that has the workbook in it. If you buy it here, you get the workbook too as part of the package for the same price as what you would buy online. And then we also have, it's a digital code inside that you get. And so is there anybody who's leading like a prophetic ministry team or a ministry team that's going after the prophetic? Does that apply to anybody? The woman with the glasses right here, I think you have a blue shirt. I'm gonna give this to you. And you can watch it as a group. You can do it as a group assignment, or you can do it individually. And but I think it really helps a lot of groups that are going. I have groups all over the world going through it. That's my only advertisement. I was joking around saying I'm from Hollywood, so I'm allowed to have advertisements. We literally live in Studio City. I'm like, you have to have advertisements if you live in Studio City. It's just part of it. I'm just kidding. Let's pray for just a minute. Holy Spirit, you've already been here in worship. We want to build off that atmosphere, and we want to see whatever you want done in this room tonight to happen. So we just yield, we surrender. God, we don't want to be normal. We don't want this to be the same old time. We don't want this just to be a nice Sunday night service. We came expecting to meet with you. And I pray that you would help us to identify things in our life that would be partners if we had just known how to partner them to you. Lord, talents and gifts and skills and dreams, I pray that you would help us. In Jesus' name. So I'm a dreamer, and I have seen a number of the dreams that God's given me come true, and some of that was just me imagining, like, what would life be like if I just lived in my fullness from the time I was young? What are the kinds of things I'd like to go after and do? And as a matter of fact, I've had team members over the years who got healed of not dreaming because they'd go on, journey with me, and I'd say, we're going to go here and do this. And we would. We're going to go here and do this. We're going to go to Los Angeles and plant a church. No one was doing that, We go to Los Angeles and plant a church, these kinds of things. And I've dreamed big dreams. We're going to impact the entertainment industry. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. And we've done these things throughout the years. And my dreams have gotten bigger and bigger and bigger because I'm seeing God in a bigger way. And the more you partner with God, the more you cooperate with God, the more you believe for outrageous things that there's no way you could do. Now, the problem with dreamers is that a lot of people live on the broken side of dreaming, or on the waiting side of dreaming, or on the character building side of dreaming. And so we forget how good it gets when you actually fulfill or accomplish a dream. And the other thing is that God gives us starter dreams, and it becomes a testing ground for our heart. Just like David had, a lion and a bear before he had Goliath. There's starter dreams. Even Moses, how he had to learn how to deliver people from a land before he could deliver people into a land. There's starter processes and projects. But I want to talk to you guys about just dreams and just God, because Ephesians 3:20, I love the Message version. I also have the Passion Translation about this, but the Message version says, God can do beyond what you're hoping for or imagining in your wildest dreams. And if you marry that to 1 Corinthians 2:9, where basically no eye has seen, no ear has heard what God has in store for those who love him. And if you marry that to John 10:10, that God wants to give us a life and a life abundantly. That's why Jesus came in the first place. And if you take those scriptural themes and you think of the God of all the universe who pre-planned your life to be an eternal life, an everlasting life, and he put inside of you the DNA of things that you would enjoy for eternity, not just now. And he put inside of you the ability to connect to people on this side of eternity who would help form in you and who you would help form the eternal or the everlasting part of your life. And that there's things that we do here that are reflections, they're types, they're prototypes for what we're going to do forever. I mean, you're a forever person. Do you know that? If you choose Jesus Christ, you're a forever person. If you accept him into your life, you're a forever person. And so many of us spend our time not on the everlasting things, but on the temporal things. We're just trying to get enough, just do enough, do the American dream, or even a lesser form of dream. I think the American dream was a great dream for people in the 1930s and 40s and 50s because there was such a poverty spirit and an atmosphere of depression that they were just trying to get homes and just get a basic education and just get a basic income and have any stability. Just rooted stability was the dream. And to apply that same dream now would be ridiculous. If we're just going for stability, it's not enough. Like there has to be a place where our faith in God, where we look at his dream over nations, people groups, industries, and we start to see what he originally wanted in the first place. We live in such a quick exchange of information. We live in a time period where technology is advancing so quickly. We live in a time where there's so much convenience and there's so much jobs that people used to have to do longhand that we get just instantly downloaded to our phones and our smart devices, that we have so much more opportunity because we don't have to spend time and energy on so much of what our forefathers had to do. Even in the church, our education is so high because of podcasts, because of digital media, because you can watch the service online right now. You can watch the replay of the service anytime you want. You could go to Bible school just by watching Bethel. Just their Sunday night services are free. You can get Joyce Myers will give you your first 2 years of Bible school just by listening to a radio program. And think about the 1930s, 40s, and 50s where you were usually trapped in a church because you were policed to be there. That's just, you went to church and that was your whole life. That was your community. You didn't look outside of it. You didn't hear teachings from outside of it. You might have went to a revival once every 5 years, but you didn't hear anything else but that one perspective. And now everything's getting globalized, even in the church. And that's a good thing and a bad thing, but mostly a good thing for the church because we're starting to share common ideas that Jesus came not just to restore, but to transform. That Jesus looked into the Father's heart and he looked into his original intentions and he died that we'd be restored to the original plan, not just to get better plan. Not just like we'll get them okay until we return plan. But he's actually releasing all authority that the Father gave Jesus to us to help over industries and to help over societies and to help over areas of injustice, but also areas of creativity and technology to bring about the Father's original plan. That's why Jesus died and raised again. To bring about a plan that had been abandoned by humanity. And now we get to restore the plan. This takes dreamers. This takes people who are willing to have risky dreams. Dreams that aren't common, where people look at you and your family and go, "Are you sure about that?" They're the weird one of the family. They're believing for huge things. And the other Christians will say this about you. Especially other Christians will go, "That's a little too big. I think you might have delusions of grandeur," or whatever. According to the Barna Group Gallup polls, about 8 out of 10 people who claim the name of Christ have very little family resemblance of Christianity. Intellectual understanding is permeating our generation. And so Christianity is not a lifestyle, but it's an intellectual choice. So when you have that, we have current modern day Christianity is not reflecting exactly what it should reflect. We need a shaking, but the shaking doesn't have to be just a move of repentance. Repentance just means change. Change into God's original plan, not just in morality, but in everything. We need a shaking of dreamers who would actually manifest what God intends right now. But we have to hear what he intends right now. We have to believe that little old me can get that. Little old me can actually come into agreement with God that can actually change and have ripple effects over whole industries, reform whole church systems. I love Romans 12:2. It says, "Stop imitating ideas and opinions of culture around you, but be inwardly transformed by the Holy Spirit through a total reformation of how you think." This is the Passion Translation version. "But be inwardly transformed by the Holy Spirit through a total reformation of how you think. This will empower you to discern God's will as you live a beautiful life, satisfying and perfect in his eyes." Now, I don't know if you saw most recently the movie of Paul. I'm so sorry. God bless them for making it. I love Jim Caviezel. I love the crew that made it. But he was the most depressed man I've ever seen. Paul, who talks about joy all the time. Even James 1, like that comes from like that Pauline thought, even though it's James, but it comes from that, like, consider it pure joy when you face trials. Like, he was a happy man. Agabus goes, don't go to Rome, you're going to die. He's like, I'm totally going to Rome. God's sending me to Rome. I can't wait. You know what I mean? Like, he constantly talked about joy and suffering, joy. And you watch this movie and you're looking at it going, poor Paul. Poor Christians who are dying. And the early church was so joyful, they actually looked like they were drunk in the joy that they were in. And people were persecuting them and killing them. And they were having a great day. Their life was beautiful. They were so happy about where they were going. Kill us or not, we're happy. Because the message of the gospel is good news. Not bad news that makes you get somber and like the Jesus of Nazareth Jesus that's kind of scary. Like, he makes you just feel like, do I have to be really serious right now? Am I in trouble? I think I'm in trouble. If I'm not like Jesus in Jesus of Nazareth, I'm in trouble. No, it's a joyful message. And I look at scriptures like this, and then I see how our culture reflects what we think the Bible is. And there's a huge gap between those who are supposed to be dreamers who say, when we were delivered into our dream, we were like those who laughed and dreamed. You know, we were those who were excited about life. We were those who could take on the whole world and all the problems because we just were so in touch with our God's heart of joy. And there's a gap between where we're at and where we're supposed to be. And that gap can only be crossed by those who are going on a journey of learning. Now, I said this in the services for those of you who were here earlier, but I'll actually read the statistic. This is from Dr. Henry Mason, who's a psychologist and a church reformer. He says 90% of preachers would rate themselves in the top 10% of communicators in their field, according to a poll they did with 3,000 pastors. No one laughed except for two people. 90% of preachers rate themselves in the top 10% of their field. There's no other industry that does this, only preachers. So that means a little preacher, you went by some of those little churches. I have no judgment against it, but like the little 70-member church, the average pastor, 9 out of 10 pastors, is going to believe he's in the top of his field, and he's competing in his own mind going, I'm better than Joel Osteen. I'm better than Joyce Meyer. And there's such an elitism in that statement. And then he wrote this to follow it, saying, whenever we take on the role of an expert, our learning in this society right now, this is a psychological study, it stunts up to 90% the moment you take the title expert. So 90% of the church is stunted. Now, I'm not being mean. I'm just saying, like, if you want to grow as a dreamer, but you think you're an expert and you're not in a teachable learning mode, you're actually not going to grow. You're not going to fulfill your dreams because you think you're an expert. You think you're already doing it. If you're satisfied with where you're at and it's like, this is enough. I mean, that's a scary thought to me because I'm so divinely undone. Like, I'm so in the journey with God that my miracles need miracles. I have great miracles happening in my life right now, and I'm like, this is awesome. Now I need another one. My prophecies need more words of wisdom, or else I'll never, ever achieve the prophecies. I need counsel from heaven on how to do what he's told me. So my words need words. My miracles need miracles. I'm not like, oh, I got this. I had a miracle. How many of you have had an encounter with God and that was enough? You're done. Has anybody ever seen Jesus here? Just be honest. If you feel like you've seen Jesus, raise your hand. Can you die happy now, never see him again? Or do you go, I have to see him again at some point. I need to see him again. Like, are you done? Oh, I saw him. It's cool. Is this something you check off your list? Or are you like hungry? You're like, I saw him and now I need to see him again. I mean, everyone I've met who's seen Jesus, if they've had a vision of Jesus or some encounter, they're desperate and lovesick. They're not like, I had enough. But when it's an intellectual understanding, we get a stunted growth. I love the intellectual understanding, but if that's it, if that's all we have, our growth gets stunted. The essence of measure of teachability, according to popular psychology in the church, this is like Fuller Seminary, these kinds of groups, is humility. So the measure of teachability is humility. This basic humility isn't putting ourselves against God and saying, I am nothing, nor is it comparing ourselves to others trying to figure out who knows more. Spiritual humility says, I get to become more, and my deep gets to go deeper. So we're not saying, oh, I'm nothing, God, I'm humble. We're saying, I am something, and I'm somebody, but I'm not that much of somebody yet. And my deep is going to go deeper, and there's always a deeper place in God. God is creating teachable moments. Have you heard this term, teachable moments? It was used mostly in education, but it was more recently used in the last 10 years or so by the Obama administration. I know that's a cuss word in Texas. I might have just lost half the room. I said Obama. I love Obama. Oh no, I'm going to get shot. I'm just kidding. But Obama administration uses teachable moments means that a moment in time where everyone can learn something because either something broke down or something was highlighted or something was successful, and you can, like, these warriors were coming back with PTSD from war zones and from the military. And they were creating teachable moments by having one person who'd already expressed a healing or overcoming of PTSD would share with others that had PTSD, and they would see their story in him, and they'd be able to understand how there could be growth past PTSD. And they created teachable moments with military, and they called it that in the military. We're going to create teachable moments to show them how they can learn about how to overcome by sharing these moments with each other. So there's both the not negative, but the more downside teachable moments where you're learning from negative history, and there's also positive teachable moments. Well, technically, we're in a teachable moment in the church because there's such a decline in the Western world in the church, and 50% of Christians in America don't go to church anymore. I think in Texas it'd probably be 10%, but 50, I'm just kidding. There's like so many churches here. I look around and I'm like going, there's a church everywhere. There's more churches than Walmart. So it's amazing. But there's a teachable moment because something's broken down. And the thing that has broken down isn't just that the fact that there's a religious spirit or that there's a lot of whatever, hierarchy, or there's a lot of whatever. It's not the negative in the church that's broken down. The thing that's broken down the most is the fact that we have turned away from being love-based and dream-based. We're not community love-based, like the family isn't the source of revival. Programs are. And we've stopped being dreamers to dream that society can change. So the world's not looking to the church to help solve problems anymore. Like in Martin Luther King's day, one of the reasons why he was so fabulous was he was a minister, and the church was helping to solve civil rights problems. So the church was rising up to the occasion. When you saw the black marches that were happening throughout the South, there was always a percentage of white Caucasian people who were church people who were walking with them and marching with them. And churches were getting together and having conversations that schools were afraid to have. And politics were afraid to have. But churches would host forums all around the nation on how we should integrate and what integration looks like and what God's plan over civil rights was. But now the church is not having those conversations. We're afraid to stand up, and we're afraid to have those conversations. And so those people who'd be affected by racism aren't looking to the church to help solve the problem. And we're no longer dreaming over civil rights as a church movement. We're ignoring it, or we're hiding from it, or we're afraid of it. Instead of inviting leaders from both communities or all kinds of communities in and having conversations, we're avoiding the conversation, hoping it goes away. And if you look at other issues, that's just one breakdown issue. If you look at other issues like marriage, the divorce rate is similar to in the church and outside the church. So people are not coming to the church to get their marriages healed anymore. It used to be that you come to church, and if you just got God in your life, it might help your marriage. But people aren't seeing God in their lives helping the marriages of their Christian friends anymore. They're seeing their Christian friends get the same divorces that they are, and they have the same reasons and the same breakdowns, so they're not trusting the institution of the church to help them. But when you have dreamers who are dreaming God's dreams, who are at the helm of different programs in churches and in different positions in churches, but really just in kingdom, we have dreamers in the kingdom who are saying, what was God's dream over family? What is God dreaming over marriages? To me, the next great revival is going to look like family. People are going to go, what does a healthy family look like? How do you manage a kid with ADD? How do you manage marriages with problems? How do you do it? And the church will have answers. And it won't just be the top 10 popular psychology answers. We're going to have answers because God's going to be living in us, in our churches, and we're going to be managing the issues not just with the top 10 list. We're going to be managing with the strategy that comes from relationship with God. but it takes dreamers. A lot of times when we think of dreamers, we think of people who dream impossible dreams like, we've seen in the past, like, I'm going to have a healing evangelism ministry, or, you hear popular statements from people like Pastor Bill Johnson who says, we're going to have a cancer-free zone. And I feel like God wants to take us past those dreams. And Pastor Bill's dreams are bigger than that, but I'm just saying, like, we'll hear that and we'll go, oh, I'm just going to pray for that in my state. I'm going to pray for cancer-free zones. But God's dream over cancer in our generation is to kill it. And he wants to use medical science to do it, not just the healing power to do it. He actually wants to give sons and daughters the ability to pray into science and believe for the full cure of cancer in our generation. So when we're talking about dreamers, we can't dream little dreams that are just self-absorbed about our revival and our churches and our ministries and our things that we're doing in our families. We have to dream the dream of God over culture and society. What was God's dream over Texas? Where are we falling short doesn't matter as much as where we can go. I believe that we're in the state of actively looking at being undone so that God can come in the midst of our cry to say, give us your dreams, give us your desires, because ours are not working. And we're really excited about what you can do. There's prototypes for this, and that's why we sometimes get excited when we hear other things that are working for other people. Sometimes you hear stories in society of people who are having breakthrough in business, or people having breakthrough in entertainment or in education. You hear those stories and it's like, us too, God. Like I just recently heard a story in California, of all places, of a Christian school that's curriculum has been so successful. In over 20 years, they've had 80% full college graduation after people graduate the elementary, junior high, and high school. They've had 80% full college graduation for over 20 years. Finally, their public school district was like, help. And it's a big school. It's not like a small little 200-member school. It's like a big school with over, I think, 1,200 kids. And it's in the Central Coast, or in Silicon Valley, sorry. And so the public school district came after them and said, can we see what you're doing? Like, we're broken. Can you help us? And they sat down with them and they said, well, here's all the stuff that might help you. It's not all the curriculum, but it's also the culture of our school. And you don't have to preach Jesus to have this, but it is coming from a kingdom foundation. And it started to work so well in their region that their region has promoted them to meet with the Education Administration of California. And they're now adopting this curriculum as primary curriculum in a lot of schools. And it could be the primary curriculum very soon. Those are dreamers. And it doesn't have to be grandiose. It could just be, I love some of the most famous kingdom people in history who just, Rosa Parks, who just sat on the bus in the wrong place because she felt it was right. It doesn't have to be like, I'm going after the whole thing. It's just doing what's right. In the midst of learning how to identify a dream, which is the whole process unto itself, once you have a dream, one of the hardest parts is that there's an incubation period. And that incubation period kills most dreamers, mostly because we're impatient, mostly because patience is not the virtue of our culture. Everything has immediate gratification, and mostly also because we don't wait very well. We wait very passively instead of actually working our waiting. And a lot of Christians, when they think they're waiting on the Lord, it means that they're going to sit down and just pray. I was in the House of Prayer movement for quite a while, and a good portion of House of Prayer people were waiters, but they were the wrong kind of waiters. They were like, I'm just waiting on the Lord. And then there's the other ones like Mike Bickle who are like, I'm waiting on the Lord and I'm doing something about it while I'm waiting. Like, I'm waiting actively, not passively. I'm waiting like with effort, not waiting without effort, And a lot of people, when they look at that incubation period, they think that they're going to get in the cocoon and nothing's happening. But when you look at even what's happening in a cocoon for an actual butterfly, that caterpillar is spending more energy in that time than it will ever spend again in its whole life. Did you know that? Wow. More energy in that one time of being a caterpillar, making its cocoon and being, in the incubation stage than it will ever spend again in its life. Many of us get into the waiting and we actually go into passive energy spending instead of active. And I want to encourage you, if you're a dreamer and you're saying, God, I don't know what to do in this stage, it actually takes more partnership in your faith than less. My wife and I were given a word Actually, we're given 47 words, believe it or not, about one of our destiny things we're supposed to do, which is to buy a property. And the words were all complimentary, and it was pretty much a roadmap, but without details. And so my wife, we live in Los Angeles, so my wife was like, I'm gonna go look on Zillow, so she just started the hunt, she started from, 200,000 to 12 million. She didn't care. She's like, I'm gonna know the whole population of real estate. And she would show me different things, and they were so much far above what we could ever afford. I was like, honey, this hurts me. Like, you're showing me stuff that I would never wanna look at, because I wanna look at what we could actually possibly do. But we really couldn't do anything because it's LA, and a starter trash home is $1 million. It's like, for real, it's a 2-bedroom with 1 bathroom is $1 million in our area, So I'm like, honey, I don't know what we're going to do, but I just know I can't be part of this part of the dreaming with you. I'm dreaming for a house, but your process and mine are different. You're looking at the whole real estate inventory of Los Angeles. I don't want to look at the inventory. It almost hurts my face to look at the inventory. I don't want to know what's not out there or what is out there. I want it to drop from the sky type moment, And she's like, but she's partnering her faith, and I went into passivity mode. I'm in like, oh God, I hope you do something because you're giving us these words. In July, a couple years ago, it's a Thursday, and the Lord speaks to me internally, audibly. It was so kind of him, and he said, and it's a Thursday, and he says, why are you not partnering your full faith? And I was like, about what? And he said, about the house. Your listing is going to go off the market on Monday. Please partner. He could have come to me on Tuesday and said, you are done. I had a house for you, but it's done. You little twerp. And so I call my wife up, and she's like, I tell her, I'm so sorry I haven't partnered my faith the way you have, and I'm so sorry I've been passive in this promise. God has given me a promise for over 20 years about a house in LA and about a property we're supposed to steward, and I haven't partnered. I'm so sorry, honey. And I said, and also we received a word from Cindy Jacobs that I've never told you. I'm so sorry for not telling you. I bundled the apology. She's like, that's okay, but what? So I forgot to tell you. And so I tell her the word from Cindy Jacobs. And as I'm telling her, I said, this is what she said about a house. And one of the things that she had said, she goes, I see a listing and it says Hollywood history has been made here. My wife starts laughing and she goes, there's a house that just came up, a property that just came up, and it literally says Hollywood history has been made here. That's the listing name. And everything you're describing in her word is what the listing describes. And she said, I saw this listing 30 days ago, and it went kind of off, and it came back on. We could have actually been pursuing this 30 days ago, but you weren't partnering in your faith. Because we had the word 3 or 4 months ago. And I'm like, oh. And I just asked God in that moment, how did I get here? Because I'm actually a faith-filled person. How did I get here? And I just realized there were so many good things that were happening. There's so much synergy, but there's also so many disappointing things that hadn't happened. And I felt like, a lot of times when you're prophetic or a prophet or those kinds of people, your life is a signpost. And I knew in this moment my life was a signpost that hope deferred had made part of my faith realm sick. But I did have longings fulfilled. We're in our promised land. We're in the best season of our lives. But in the midst of the best season of our lives, what did the children of Israel do when the reporters came back from the promised land? They all went, oh, it's really hard. It's so populated. How could this be our promise? There's so many people who live there and there's so much stuff happening. And they're giant people, we're little. And then you have Joshua and Caleb who are like, it's amazing. There's oil, there's honey, there's milk everywhere. It's beautiful. The cities are ours and they're beautiful. They're like, there's people living in those cities. Oh, it doesn't matter. They're so beautiful. They're ours. But there's all these reporters that they couldn't see with the right lens because of where their faith was, because of what wasn't happening for Israel yet. And I just believe if we're going to become dreamers, we have to allow our lens and how we see and our report of how we're letting our heart live come clean. If you're going to be a dreamer, you have to literally condition yourself to choose differently, to renew your mind, like the scripture I used earlier, to allow your mind to not see what's not happening. Does that make sense to you? You don't look at what's not. You don't look at who's not. You don't look at what didn't work for you before. The world, that's how they learn. Well, this didn't work, this didn't work, this didn't work, so we won't do that again. God, a lot of times, is like, hey, all that didn't work, now do it again, and watch, I'm going to make it work. He's so different. Like, we're like, I'm trying to learn from my mistakes, God. I can't do that again. He's like, no, now it's going to work. I wanted to show you it wouldn't work without me. And that's hard. We're like, did you put me up to this failure? No, God's not like that. But you feel that way. You're like, wait a minute, like, what is all this? The hardest thing about a Christian life is that it's a relational life, and it's subject to God's interpretation, not ours. And sometimes he withholds information to train us and teach us his goodness. And as a dreamer, that's one of the hardest parts in incubation, is that in incubation, when you're incubating something, if you're not spending energy becoming something, then you atrophy. And you actually become the opposite. You actually die. Because when you're in that cocoon stage, you either become something or you fade away. Outwardly, it looks like there's no movement at all, so no one else can tell if you're growing or not. People are like, they're fine, they're good. Have you ever had someone do that? Like, your best friend is like, oh, they're great. And you're like inside going, I'm not great. This is really hard. I don't know how to communicate this. I guess I'm the strong one in all my relationships. I don't know how to even tell you my needs. My friends and family think I'm great. I'm not great. But inwardly, you can tell there's something happening, and you have to learn how to communicate your needs. You have to learn how to communicate where you're at. You have to learn how to be honest with yourself so you be honest with others. And that's really hard for Christians because we are falsely positive all the time. We're hyper positive. I'm okay. Bad things happen. Your world's falling apart, and you're like, I'm good though. I can't tell you how many times as a pastor, Christians would tell me the worst stories and say, but I'm all good. You'd be like, you are not all good. Your life is trash and you suck. And I've been there, and I might be there right now. But we put a positive spin on everything because we think that will solve a problem. When honesty and vulnerability is what solves problems in the kingdom. Right assessment solves problems. I love Romans 12 where it says, true worship, you have to offer yourself not too low and not too high, but just at the right place. You have to have a right assessment to be a living sacrifice to God. And so you have to be able to say, this area is undone. And God, unless you come in this area, I don't know what it's going to look like long term. And this area, God, this is so strong, and I love this, and I celebrate this, but it feels like there's a weirdness between the gap of this goodness in my life and this hardship in my life. What do I do in that gap? And he goes, depend on me. Relate to me. Know me, and don't pretend this is okay. And don't overexalt this. Just be. And Christians have a hard time with that kind of vulnerability. Galatians 5:22-24, this is the Message version. But what happens when we live God's way? He brings gifts into our lives, much the same way that fruit appears in an orchard, I can't talk. Things like affection for others, exuberance about life, serenity. We develop a willingness to stick with things. Oh, please, Lord, let millennials read this. A sense of compassion in the heart, and a conviction that a basic holiness permeates things and people. We find ourselves involved in loyal commitments, not needing to force our way in life, able to marshal and direct our energies wisely. That's the fruit of the Spirit according to the Message version. The Passion version is even better. I don't have it right here, else I'd read it. Can you imagine? When you're in that incubation period, the fruit of the Spirit is popping up in you. When you're not passive, but you're actively waiting. And you start to know how to use your energy. You know, time is our greatest commodity in our generation, not money. And all of a sudden, you know how to spend your time. And people are like, I need to spend time with you. You're like, I don't have it. I have to say no, because I know exactly how to marshal my energy in this. Or people are like, hey, you want to do this? And you're like, I will do that, because I know where I'm at. You know, or willingness to stick to things. I know a friend of mine is a director in Hollywood, and he was working in this company, and he was just a lower hireling in the company. And the company went through a financial restructure and went through a hardship and lost some of their contracts. And everybody just started jumping ship because it's a good company. And so people were getting good jobs, and then they were able to transfer to better jobs because people in the industry need those kinds of quality of workers. And so my friend, he felt like the Lord said, be loyal. Stay here. And he's like, but Lord, I think I'm going to get demoted pay-wise, not pay grade. And he goes, just be loyal the next year. Give me a year. Only Christians make these decisions because they're stupid and crazy. So he's loyal the whole year. And at the end of the year, the owner of the company and the CEO come to him and say, we need to talk to you. And he's like, yes. And they said, we know you're not qualified for this, but we believe in the way you've been loyal and honoring us. Will you become the vice president? And could you do this and this and this? And we just got 5 contracts for $300 million. Can you help us? He went from like a lower hireling to, I think it was like 10 times his pay. It was so much more just because of faithfulness. And his only explanation for faithfulness is Galatians 5. It was a fruit of the Spirit that came up in him where the Lord said, hey, will you obey me and just have a loyalty to stick with things that I put in your life, even when they don't make sense? And Christians, we get a different result and a different opportunity, but we have to take a different course. And if you're a dreamer, and I know this went a long way from, I love Ephesians 3:20 because wild dreams. If you're a dreamer, there's a process to bringing about the dream that you're not in control of. And it's really hard for Americans to do that because we're used to being in control of our phones, of our marriages, of our daytimer, our planner. We're used to being in control of every aspect of our life. And when we have to give God real surrender and control, we're not always in. We're like, wait a minute, this is too hard. My income might have changed for a little while. My security might have changed for a little while. I was told as a Christian I'm supposed to have full security all the time. And God's like, I actually don't give you a security blanket all the time. Your security is eternal, not natural. And so I may actually require something of you that's different than your friends and may challenge your relatives. Sorry. Let me just skip ahead here. The character of teachability has 2 aspects to it. If you're teachable, you'll know it. One is being a learner in every situation. So people who are teachable, you can feel they're learning, they're absorbing, they're a sponge. Have you felt someone who's a total sponge? If you're a leader, isn't it great? Like whether it's in a business, if you're training somebody, if you're in education, whatever it is, isn't it nice when someone's really learning because you could feel it? As a pastor of a church, I could feel when people were learning. I'm not pastoring anymore as a senior pastor as of 2 years ago, and I'm now have a lot more time on my hands. It's been beautiful. But every time that someone was really learning, it was my favorite. I was like, oh, I love this. It feels so good. It's like, because I'm a learner. I'm trying to learn all the time. But here's a second thing. If you're a learner, 2 aspects to it. One is the person's learning in every situation. And number 2 is they can pass on what they're learning. So that's how you know you're teachable. It's a character of teachability. It's characterized by a learning attitude, not an expert perspective. And it's hard to be around people who aren't teachable. They just know something. It's really hard to be around them long term, especially to be an underling to them. It's really hard because eventually, if they're not learning, they've just learned as much as they can and they become an expert in something, so you have to learn from them. It's actually afflicting to learn from somebody who's just an expert and has stopped learning. It happens in the collegiate world all the time where someone gets their tenure and you're like, okay, they're just coasting now. Not that everyone who has a tenure is coasting, but people who are PhDs who are just like teaching, who are just done learning. They're just done. They're just there. They're just existing. They're the worst people. How many of you have been around someone like that? Aren't they like the worst people to be around? That's not who you want to be around. You want to be around people who are still dreaming and active in their heart and life that the world can still change in whatever industry. Proverbs 9:7-12, it says, if you reason with an arrogant cynic, you'll get slapped in the face. I've had that happen. Confront bad behavior and you'll get a kick in the shins. So don't waste your time on a scoffer because all you're going to get is pains and abuse. But if you correct those who care about life, that's different. They'll love you for it. Save your breath for the wise and they'll be wiser. Tell good people what you know and they'll profit from it. And skilled living gets its start in the fear of God. Insight into life, knowing the holy God. Now, I want to say this in the context of that. Luke 8:18 says, those who have, everything will be given, and those who have not, everything will be taken away. When you're a learner, you're actually excited because even if something hard comes, you're not excited about that, but you're excited about how God's going to kick the enemy in the face with it. You're like, you are going to use this for my good, and you're going to get justice for this. And so immediately when something bad happens, when you're a learner, you're like, what's going to happen in my life now? But if you're not a learner, and you feel like it's a mentality. That's what Jesus is talking about in Luke 8. If you're not a learner, then what happens in your heart and your mind is something bad happens, and immediately you're like, see, I'm robbed again. And I had two people come to my church. We were in Hollywood at the time in a building called the El Rey, and it was hard to get to at times for people on Sundays. And I had one woman come, and she always had an issue. She always had, 10 things going on in her life, and she wanted to process it without any opinions given back. She didn't want me to talk to her about it. She just wanted to vent. And so she came in after the meeting one time, and she's telling me, I got a flat tire on the way here. It was awful. Like, my car's always breaking down. I don't have a husband. It's so hard. And God's promised me a husband. Nothing's happening. And my tire gets flat. And the guy who, stopped, because in LA we have people who stop on the side of the road and they help you. The guy who stops on the side of the road, he's awful, and he's smelly, and he's gross, and he's perverted, and I just can't stand him. And I had to sit there the whole time he changed my tire. Then I got here, and I don't even have the gas vest. And I missed my favorite part of, church, which is worship. And I'm like, thanks, I'm the speaker, awesome. And she just keeps going on, and there's nothing I can do. And I'm like, I need to get away. This is really toxic. Like, I need to get away. And this family who's newer to us comes over, and they're excited about life, but he's a producer, but they've hit a wall. Like, he stopped working for the major company he worked for, and they've hit a wall financially because he felt like he was making too many of the wrong kinds of movies. So he said, I give you my career, God. Do whatever you want with it. So God was in a process of stripping and then rebuilding. So they were in the stripping part. So financially, it was real hard, to the point where dollars were in their account, not hundreds, not thousands, but dollars. And they're a family of 5. So he and his family come over to us with the guy, and he said, hey, guess what happened on the way to church? It was so cool. We got a flat tire. And this guy was the guy who came by to fix our flat tire for us, because we didn't even have a jack in our car. We don't know what happened to it. And he fixed our flat tire, and we all got a word for him. We're like, this is God. Like, God's going to use us for our good. We're going to minister to this guy. We got a word for him. And he wasn't a Christian, and he got saved right now. And he came to church with us after that. And now we're going to go home and have lunch. We can't afford lunch, and he's broke too. So we're going to go to the park, and we're going to have a picnic. And they're telling me right in front of the guy. And God's like, it's going to be so good, because look at the day God gave us. And this woman's having to listen to all this. And to those who have, everything is given. And those who have not, everything's taken away. When you're a dreamer, if you're a have-not dreamer, you only dream a little bit. But if you're a have dreamer, then everything that happens in your life, God can use it to work you into a higher place of the dream. And every injustice happens just means more multiplication on the dream side. And everything that God is doing in your life, he makes meaning of, which we're the only people group that there's a promise to make meaning of everything in our life. He will use everything to have meaning for you. Every weapon of the enemy that comes to you or against you will be broken and will have to serve you. And if for some reason something gets through and we don't always understand the mystery of death, someone dies in our midst who's a Christian who was believing for big promise, their promise is not left empty and void, but it's now distributed amongst others to be multiplied. Their calling lands on someone else, and somebody else gets a double portion. They're going to live out their calling, and then they get multiplied to live out more. And now we have thousands of years of Christianity where Hebrews 11 says they were they were left incomplete. So only with future generations could their promise be brought into fullness. These people who stood in great faith for great dreams didn't get to see the fullness, but only in partnership to us and all future generations will they be made complete. Well, I look at that and I say, they're up in heaven now praying around us, believing for us, sending heavenly provision to us. They're testifying. It says in Hebrews 12:1, Lord, give them more. Lord, everything that you promised us, let them live out. And you have like a rain from heaven coming down that's about to be a tipping point for generations that's going to come down. And we're going to see a radical shift and transformation over the entire world because Jesus' inheritance is at stake. Dreaming costs everything, but man, it's worth it. And if you dream with God, you'll never be left undone or incomplete. But you have to wait, and you have to learn. And you have to go on a journey where you have more than you have not. Because when you have, even when you don't have, you still feel like you're multiplying. And Christianity in America doesn't always feel that way. I feel this attitude of Luke 8:18 more in the third world than I do here many times. When I go to places of extreme poverty, there's a gratitude in people that I'm just shocked by. I'm embarrassed by. There's a gratitude in what God will do. They'll take the same principles we have and they'll turn them into weapons in their hands that changes culture. And it's our turn. It's our turn to help in God's dream, to dream it with them, and just believe for outrageous fruit. Isn't this cool? Isn't that a great way to think? So become learners. If you feel like you've been an expert in something, you might have stopped learning. So I want to encourage you to just go, it's nice that people call me an expert because some of you are experts in something, but maybe just go back in the journey of saying, I love what I've gained in this, but now I can learn more. But there's always something else. I love those kinds of industries where there's somebody who's at the top of their field and then all of a sudden somebody displaces them in 1 second. I love that. I think it's amazing. Like artificial intelligence right now, they thought they had reached their cap in the 80s and now we're at the beginning again going, and it's crazy what's about to happen even in artificial intelligence or in the technology realm when Apple was about to fail and now, Apple's at the top of their field and they're making augmented reality, which will be part of our lives in the next 3 years. If you're like, what's augmented reality? You'll all know because they know how to introduce it to all of society. You're already touching a phone that you may not have ever even dreamed would exist 30 years ago. And there's things that are advancing right now, but if you become the expert, you may not learn anymore. And if you don't come as a child, we did that kids event today. If you don't come as a child and go, it's all new, who knows what God will do today? Then you might just hold yourself responsible to be more mature than you really are. And that's no fun. Because then you're getting into performance instead of right identity of health. So good. If I can offer anything to people, it's the fact that I'm childlike and I'm always learning. I don't care if I make mistakes because I'm always learning. I'm not talking about sin. I'm just talking about I miss it in the prophetic all the time. I take responsibility and move on. And I'm like, is there a John here? There's no John in this entire room in Texas. That's weird. Okay, let's move on. So I want you to put your hand on your head. God, give us an expanded capacity of teachability. And give us an expanded capacity to be dreamers. Help us to dream with you, God. Help us to see what you see. Help us to believe what you believe.